Previously on Trip the Road. This chapter of the story begins back in La Plata, Maryland. About a week ago, my friend from Ohio invited me out for some autocross and drag racing. The event was free, I just had to figure out how to get the car there. The first step was to do a rough alignment and get the tires as straight as possible so I could get this car to the tire shop for some fresh tires. While you can get really good alignment results with a jack stand and some string, I decided to just eyeball the entire thing since the car needed tires anyway. I figure since I only need about one day to get this to the tire shop, a couple degrees toe in or toe out won't make too much of a hazard.
Brian hard at work behind the wheel.
Once the alignment was as good as it was gonna get, we just had to get all the mud off the radiator from our little off-road adventure last time. We also had a slight grounding issue that we had to resolve. Then it was time to reinstall the bumpers and put the tags on.
We eyeballed the alignment. Hopefully it's good enough to not die. I can't see anything out of these windows, so I'm gonna roll them down.
Since the ground was wet and the tires were balding, I was really nervous to drive this on public roads in this rain. I was pretty confident in my alignment abilities, however, when you have bald tires in the rain, available traction can go to zero in an instant. So I didn't want to push the car too hard, even though I was eager to see how it handled on asphalt. While we were at the parts store, I also had to get a new battery for the car. I tried to save the old EverStart that came with it, using a trickle charger and a desulfator, but ultimately was unsuccessful. After running a few other errands in La Plata, it was time to drive the car back to Potomac, where we could really focus on getting it ready for racing. By the time I got on the highway to drive home, something with the engine wasn't quite right. I was unable to break 3,000 RPMs in any gear at any speed, and the car felt incredibly sluggish. I feared for the worst, but hoped for the best. I figured first thing in the morning I can take a look and figure out what's going on. Because the ignition didn't cut out at all during my drive home last night, I decided to check the oil first for any signs of engine damage. At first glance, everything looks okay. But the second I started moving oil around the oil pan, I saw the unmistakable shimmer of metal shavings. This engine would pretty much be a lost cause. But I was feeling a little bit hopeful. If I could find out exactly what was grinding, there was a very small chance I could save this engine. Based on the look of these spark plugs though, I wasn't feeling too hopeful anymore. This 230,000 mile engine has definitely seen better days. At first glance, both camshafts looked okay. So I took a look underneath, and sure enough, there were shavings near one of the crank bearings. Well, that was quick. I found a 43,000 mile engine. Let's go pick it up. We just gotta sit in Northern Virginia traffic for 2 hours. How's that sound? Oh yeah, this engine's a B20. We're doing a B20 swap now. Seeing such a clean shop made me feel better about the debt I was about to incur. These guys specialize in importing engines straight from Japan. Why so many engines, you ask?
Fun fact, because of Japan's emission laws, they have to replace their engines every so often, which means we get some perfectly good engines for very cheap over here.
After loading up the engine, it was time to go to Clarksville to pick up the engine hoist. At a minimum, it would take me at least 2.5 more hours to make the round trip. However, Brandon and Daniel were already on site and ready to get started, so they began removing whatever they could to make the engine swap a lot faster. The wheels needed to come off, coolant was drained, and the steering knuckle assembly was disassembled to make room for the drive axles that will need to come out. After all the coolant was drained, any coolant hoses running from the engine to other parts of the car were disconnected. By the time all those tasks were completed, I was back at the house with a fresh engine and an engine hoist.
Good.
Spicy engine boy. Brand new, straight out of Japan.
With no time to spare, we unloaded and got started immediately. It was now about 10:15 p.m. The errands obviously took longer than I was hoping for. I was hoping to be back by 7:30 or 8 at the latest. One thing I found strange about this car, especially for its engine size, was the number of engine mounts. There were a total of 5 engine mounts or supports in the engine bay, and each had their own unusual puzzle-like method of removal. The frontmost driver's side engine mount appeared to be part of the air conditioning compressor, and it was also missing a couple bolts. Because the engine and transaxle were going to be removed as one piece, I also had to remove the drive axles from the transaxle. Another thing that didn't really come to mind until now was how the shifter assembly attached to the transmission. This style shifter uses 2 solid bars. One moves in and out and rotates, while the other does not move and simply holds the shifter at a solid distance from the transmission. The shifter bar was held in place with a roll pin, which from my experience are extremely difficult to remove. So I just unbolted the shifter rod at the shifter end. This could pose a problem later if its length prevents it from clearing the engine bay. Finally, it was time to pull the engine. I predicted we'd have the engine out at about 1 a.m. and we were about on schedule with that.
Now, question, is that going to clear the bracket or are you going to unbolt it? Is there a way to disconnect the harness at the body so it just comes off with the engine or no? Because that would save us.
But no, I mean, I already disconnected everything. It's just the little clip right here. That's the only thing that, as far as I can see, that's all that's left. Made noise. Brian, can you grab me?
No.
Brian.
Since the engine and transaxle were coming out as one piece, we had a little bit of difficulty clearing the engine bay. Generally, this indicates that there will be some difficulty putting the engine back in. We also didn't have an engine leveler handy, so we had to use ratcheting cargo straps to pull the engine into the position that we wanted it. Next, it was time to move the transmission and old accessories to the new engine.
Oh, it
Gotta slide straight apart. That or we can unbolt the clutch from the flywheel through the...
See this clutch boy.
Ooh, that's fairly glazed.
Okay, so we're holding. Clutch actually,
Doesn't look.
It's not great, but it's not terrible.
That's not the best.
But it's not the worst.
It could be really bad, but then it could be a lot better.
Could be...
It's fucking dead.
It's not so bad. I'm like, wow, we have to stop working tonight. But I wouldn't put that in my car unless I planned on doing it again soon.
Makes me
It's
angry.
not even oil. It's actually just dirt.
This engine was lubricated by dirt at one point in its life.
Come off with ease. Oh, yes.
This is for...
What we're doing here is we're taking the new distributor, because this is an OBD2 distributor, we're taking this off, and take the OBD1 distributor, take the cap off, determine the timing on this one, make sure this is lined up, and then drop it in where the old one was. There's one of 2 ways you can go in and go in like that or like that. So I need to make sure that it's facing, that the rotor is facing the right way before I install it. And then from there, we just do our typical timing adjustment using a timing light. We should be able to get this thing dialed in quite nicely. These were 180 off, so if we had put this in, it would have been 180 off timing. We would have gotten some combustion
Interesting.
through the intake. How does this go on? There's like multiple ways.
No, wait.
No.
No, round goes on top, I think.
No.
No, that was right, never mind.
No.
Let me see.
Round, no, you had it right,
no.
you had it right.
Technique.
You had it right.
Okay.
Just square part goes down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Wrong. Try again. Try again.
Try again, sweetie.
This is the turtle rabbit switch.
No, this is deeper. Reverse birth.
I think so.
Uber.
It's your Uber driver.
Find it.
Are you about to give him the socket?
I can access the file.
With the accessories and transmission installed on the new engine, it was time to drop it in. Even with the engine ready to bolt to the frame, a lot could still go wrong that could delay this project. If the engine goes in at the wrong angle, it could damage other components under the hood, or if the engine is dropped, damage to the engine or chassis could occur.
Damn it, it's getting lighter.
Oh no.
The sky's evolving.
Cue morning Minecraft music. Oh my god, that bird.
Every time I look up, it gets worse.
It takes time and patience to line an engine up, especially in a transverse configuration.
Oh, there we go, lower.
It's not level yet, so it's not where it's supposed to be yet. So that.
Once we secured the engine between two engine mounts, we decided to call it a night.
Let's put some mounts, other mount ones.
Not only was the sun about to come up, but I would need to order replacement engine mounts anyway to ensure that the engine stays securely in place during heavy acceleration. After a few hours of sleep, I plan to come back out and try to start the engine. So before I start the engine, I have to change out a couple extra parts that I overlooked the night before. Since this engine originally came out of a Honda CR-V, I had to remove the timing covers and remove the bracket that attaches the engine mount to the block itself. It probably would have been easier to do this with the engine outside of the car, but better late than never. Once that bracket was replaced, the engine mounts could be installed. Then all that was left was to check all of the electrical connections and fill the oil and coolant. And here's the moment of truth.
I don't know if it's gonna start. I'm really nervous. Let's turn the key and see what happens. Yes.
With the engine running before the end of Tuesday, things were looking really good, but I still had to source 5 engine mounts and 4 tires by the end of the week, and I'm sure other problems will surface during assembly. Will the car be done in time for Super Summit? Will the car be able to take on my friend and his Dodge Shadow? Find out next time on Trip the Road.